Hello, I'm Melissa Idris. Thanks so much for staying with me on Consider This. Let's continue our discussion about civil society's expectations for the pace and the scope of reform by Anwar Ibrahim's incoming coalition administration. Our next guest is anti-corruption activist K. Sudagaran Stanley. He's the program manager at the Advocacy Group Centre to Combat Corruption and Cronyism, better known as C4. Stanley, thank you for joining me on the show tonight. Now, in the last two elections, Pakatan Harapan had campaigned on an anti-corruption platform. And at Anwar Ibrahim's first press conference as Prime Minister, he spoke about his zero tolerance approach to corruption and abuse of power. I'm wondering, Stanley, what you will be watching out for to make sure that this is not just lip service by Anwar or by his incoming government. In terms of actual implementation and structural reforms, what will you be watching for these anti-corruption efforts?
Thanks, Melissa, for having me on the show once again. I think, first of all, I'd like to congratulate all Malaysians who came out in droves on the 19th of November and to actually make the change that we all want to see about happening in this country. I think the collaboration that has taken place between Barisan and the PH government gives us a very good opportunity right now actually to sit down with the Barisan National Government, particularly with the UMNO political party, and to look eye to eye on certain of these reforms that we have been pushing for a number of years. Now, we do know that these reforms that we talk about, for example, the whistleblower protection, the reforms to MACC, judicial independence, asset declaration, and so on, many of these reforms was initiated during the first stint of Pakatan Harapan in 2018, and the research was completed, the consultation session was completed, but it was not yet brought into Parliament. So right now we have all these researchers which has been completed, all these reforms that all these consultations has already been done. It's only a matter of actually bringing this into Parliament and actually passing certain laws to enable all these reforms to take place. So we really hope that the new Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, will push forward all these reforms that they've been talking about seriously and really to sit down with UMNO and it's a great opportunity to actually allow them to understand why these reforms is actually important for our country and why we are trying to push these certain reforms and see eye to eye with them and also try to understand some of their worries and their perception on some of the reforms that we're trying to push forward.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I'm glad that you brought it up, Stanley. The challenges for a coalition government, particularly we have Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional. What makes a coalition government work is the basis of kind of shared goals and objectives. Do you think that in this respect, for the issues of anti-corruption and good governance, that this coalition government will be effective in seeing through these reforms, seeing eye to eye and pushing through these reforms?
That's a very good question, Lisa. And I think, again, I stress the point that it gives us an opportunity to actually sit down at the same table with the UMNO government and try to explain to them why are we actually calling for some of these reforms. For example, we talk about the police reforms. This was very heavily objected by UMNO when the IPCNC was tabled in Parliament. So now we actually have the opportunity and look at what their worries are and try to push forward some of our views on this matter and to see if we could come actually to common ground and try to push for this reform. But having said that, Melissa, I think there are certain areas that no compromise can be made. And I think one of those areas would be in regards to the appointment of those that are being charged for corruption into cabinet positions or, for that matter, any other GLC positions and so on. And this applies to everyone. There are people being charged for corruption in UMNO, there are people being charged for corruption in DAP, in MUDA. I think none of them should actually be involved in this decision-making process or let alone actually be in cabinet.
Stanley, you mentioned a bit earlier that some of the research and consultation for these key reforms, like reforms of MACC, of the whistleblower protection, all of that has been actually done under the National Anti-Corruption Plan and under the first administration of Pakatan Harapan. So where do we go from here? I mean, reforms often are not easy to push through, yet the public can be quite impatient because, we understand how important these institutional reforms are, yet so much has been said, very little action has happened. How would you manage the expectations of how long it would take? Are we just at the very tail end of just pushing through these reforms?
I think while the research and all this, the research and the consultation session has been completed, now the next challenge is now to actually make the coalition partners, particularly from Barisan Nasional, to understand again why are we actually pushing for this reform. Okay. There are so many references that can be made, and we from C4, I think I also need to tell this that we want to offer even our services here. We would also like to come in and offer our help to the new Prime Minister to engage even with political parties like UMNO and other components in Barisan Nasional to actually talk to them and explain to them, why these reforms are important. And the next step would, of course, be with the agreement of all the coalition partners, and we can see eye to eye on issues, for example, the reforms on MACC, Ombudsman, very important reform, political financing. In fact, political financing was one that was promised under Barisan Nasional's manifesto. So these are some of the, as a starter point, I think, common reform areas, for example, the political financing that was already initiated during during Pakatan Harapan and then promised by Ismail Sabri Keruman. Common areas such as these can actually already be implemented even in the first parliament sitting because the research is all there, it's all completed, right? So these are first issues that we can actually push forward in parliament. The more harder ones like the IPCNC, for example, the public procurement, and so on, that this would require, of course, consultation between the different political parties, and we really hope that all of this would be brought back center stage and implemented within these 5 years. Because remember, Malaysia, the National Anti-Corruption Plan was a 5-year plan. It was launched in 2019. It's supposed to end in 2023. We are just 1 year away from the National Anti-Corruption Plan, and we are terribly actually performing in terms of our implementation. So we don't need to go and look anywhere else. Just bring back the National Anti-Corruption Plan, which is the key government agenda, and implement those reforms fully. And we at C4 are happy to help the government to actually bring forward and give consultation sessions in regards to this reform.
Right. There's not much time to get that 5-year plan sorted, right? Thank you so much, Stanley, for joining me on the show. K. Sudhakaran and Stanley from C4 Group. They're wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.